Welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to dive right into decoding the macroeconomics of employment in India. We'll be translating some pretty dense data into a real, compelling story about how we make a living, how the economy is shifting beneath our feet, and what all of this actually means for the average worker. If you've ever wondered about the nuts and bolts behind job markets and economic growth, you're absolutely in the right place. But before we get into the heavy data, let's just take a step back and consider a fundamental question. Why do we work? It seems incredibly simple, right? We work to earn a living, to get a paycheck. But the reality of human economics goes way, way deeper than that. Being employed gives us a sense of self-worth. It helps us relate meaningfully with society. Every single working person is actively contributing to the national income, and by extension, to the development of the entire country. That sense of accomplishment and societal value, that is the true foundation of the economic data we're about to unpack. And this brings up a really powerful historical perspective. Listen to this quote from Mahatma Gandhi. "What I object to is the craze for machinery, not machinery as such. The craze is for what they call labor-saving machinery. Men go on saving labor till thousands are without work and thrown on the open streets to die of starvation." This perfectly captures the enduring tension we still face today, balancing human livelihoods with relentless technological progress. Keep this in the back of your mind as we go through today's explainer. Okay, let's quickly look at our roadmap. We're going to cover the meaning of work, who actually counts as a worker, where we work, the vulnerable workforce, the jobless growth dilemma, and finally, government employment initiatives. Starting with Section 1, the meaning of work beyond earning a living. Let's lay down a quick formal definition. An economic activity refers to activities that contribute to the gross national product, or GNP. But here is the crucial takeaway, and it's a big one. A worker isn't just someone sitting at a traditional desk job getting a neat monthly slip from a boss. It's so much broader than that. This definition includes the self-employed. It includes farmers. It even includes those who just assist the main workers. In fact, if someone temporarily abstains from work because they're sick, the weather is awful, or there's a social function, economists still count them as workers. The umbrella is a whole lot wider than we usually think. Moving right along to Section 2, who counts as a worker and how do we actually measure this? So, how do economists measure participation? They use a metric called the worker-population ratio. Basically, this is the proportion of a country's population actively contributing to the production of goods and services. Think of it like a vital health check for the economy. A higher ratio? That's good news. It means a larger chunk of the population is actively engaged in economic production. If the ratio is low, well, it means a massive percentage of the population isn't directly involved in these economic activities. Now, prepare yourself for a truly staggering statistic: 545 million. During the 2022 to 2023 period, India had a workforce of roughly 545 million people. Just let that sink in for a second. That is literally more than the entire population of several major countries combined. And since the vast majority of the Indian population resides in rural areas, the highest proportion of this massive workforce is also based in rural regions, completely driving agricultural and local economies. Section 3. Where exactly do these 545 million people work? Let's break it down. Economists divide the economy into three main buckets. First up, the primary sector, which is your agriculture and mining. Second, the secondary sector, that's manufacturing and construction. And third, the service or tertiary sector, which covers trade, transport, and other services. Now, usually as an economy develops, you see labor flow from agriculture into industry, and eventually the service sector explodes. But in India's case, the primary sector still remains a massive, absolutely critical source of employment for the majority of workers. And when you look inside this sector breakdown, it reveals a stark gender disparity. While both men and women work in agriculture, an overwhelming 64% of the female workforce is concentrated in the primary sector, compared to just 36% of the male workforce. So what does this tell us? It clearly shows that men currently have much broader opportunities to move into manufacturing and services, whereas women's employment is still heavily tied to primary agricultural work. Okay, Section 4. The vulnerable workforce, resuming in from the big macro view down to the daily realities of individual workers. We can categorize the workforce into three distinct groups. Let's ground these textbook terms with some real-world examples, all right? First, the self-employed. Think of a local salon owner or a handloom weaver. Second, we have regular salaried employees. This is your cashier at a state bank or a nurse in a private hospital who gets a steady, predictable monthly paycheck. Finally, we have casual wage laborers. Imagine a daily wage worker at a rice mill or someone loading up vegetables at a wholesale market. I really want to pause here for a second because this is crucial. Casual wage laborers are by far the most vulnerable category in the entire workforce. They lack a regular, guaranteed income, and they generally have zero access to Social Security benefits. No paid leave, no healthcare safety net. Formal, secure, regular salary jobs actually make up just a fraction of the total workforce in India. The vast majority of people are either self-employed or surviving as highly vulnerable casual wage laborers, which carries an incredibly high economic risk for them and their families. Which brings us to Section 5, the jobless growth dilemma. This is probably the most fascinating economic paradox we'll cover today. Consider this stark contrast. On one side, you have rapid GDP growth, the overall expansion of the economy. The country is generating more goods, more services, and overall more wealth. But on the flip side, you have stagnant employment growth. For decades, the assumption was that if the economy gets richer, well, more jobs will naturally just appear, right? It makes sense. But as we're seeing, that is not always what happens. And the historical trends map this out perfectly. If you track this from 1951 all the way up to 2023, the top line representing gross domestic product climbs significantly, especially in recent decades. Now follow the bottom line representing employment growth. It has essentially flatlined. Sometimes it even dips. The two lines have completely decoupled. The economy is expanding rapidly, but the creation of new, secure jobs is lagging far, far behind. Economists actually have a specific term for this. They call it jobless growth. It's a phenomenon where a country produces more goods and services, it essentially gets richer on paper, without generating a corresponding increase in actual employment opportunities. The wealth of the nation is growing, absolutely, but the workforce doesn't necessarily reap those benefits through new, stable jobs. It really forces us to ask, who is actually benefiting from this economic expansion? Section 6. Government Employment Initiatives. How in the world do we bridge this massive gap? Because of this jobless growth and the sheer vulnerability of casual laborers we talked about earlier, the government absolutely has to intervene. A flagship example of this is the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act of 2005, or MGNREGA. This act legally promises 100 days of guaranteed wage employment to rural households who volunteer for unskilled manual work. It acts as a massive, vital safety net. Not only does it provide crucial income to folks who desperately need it, but it also creates valuable public assets along the way, like roads, check dams, and improved land infrastructure. It tackles two problems at once. So, pulling all of this together, the whole structure of the workforce is fundamentally shifting. On one hand, we're seeing new, highly competitive jobs emerging in the high-tech service sector, and global outsourcing is opening up fresh opportunities. But right alongside this, there's rising informalization. Millions of workers are finding themselves in informal arrangements, maybe working from home or as casual laborers, with extremely limited access to traditional employment protections. The economy is definitely modernizing, but the safety net just isn't catching up for everyone. Which leaves us with a final vital question to ponder. As outsourcing grows and informalization remains the norm, what does the future hold for your job security? Seriously, think about how these macro trends apply directly to you. As the traditional, secure 9-to-5 salary job becomes the exception rather than the rule, navigating this complex landscape is absolutely essential. Understanding these structural shifts is just the first step. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking those big questions, and I'll catch you next time.